My girlfriend said, I'd never have kids with you. They'd turn out ugly like you. Everyone made fun of me, so I gave them the humiliation of their lives. Before we go on, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling us which city you're tuning in from. It all started at a get-together with Abigail's friends. It wasn't the first time I'd hung out with them, and it wasn't the first time I'd felt out of place. I tolerated them. That's the right word. I didn't dislike them, but they'd always had a particular way of joking, one that bordered on uncomfortable. I accepted it because I wanted to keep the peace with Abigail. I thought that in the end, that was what was important. The get-together was at one of her friend's apartments. A spacious place decorated with artificial plants and warm lights. Music at a constant volume that allowed for conversation without raising your voice too much. There was alcohol, laughter, cross-conversations. Everything seemed normal. Abigail had been distant in recent weeks, not cold, but less present. She answered fewer messages. She seemed distracted when we talked, as if she were somewhere else. I hadn't wanted to insist. I've always thought that forcing conversations when someone doesn't want to talk only makes things worse. That night, I tried to behave, as always, to smile, to participate just enough, not to create unnecessary tension. At some point in the gathering, when we'd been there for several hours and the alcohol was starting to show in some, one of her friends threw out the question that was apparently inevitable. "So, when are you two going to get married?" he said, laughing as if it were a light-hearted joke. Some people laughed. I smiled too, though I didn't answer. Abigail did. "I think never," she said, although Julio isn't brave enough to take the next step. She glanced at me with a smile I couldn't quite interpret. Her friends reacted immediately. "What do you mean he's not brave enough?" said one. "If you're already living together, that's practically being married." "Exactly," added another. "All you're missing is the party and the piece of paper." The laughter continued. I nodded, trying not to seem uncomfortable. We had been living together for over 2 years. I had never denied the possibility of getting married, but I also didn't see it as an urgency. I thought Abigail knew that. The jokes continued to revolve around the same theme, whether it was the ring, the wedding, the eternal commitment. Abigail laughed, sometimes exaggeratedly. I was starting to feel watched, evaluated. Then, one of her friends, the most insistent of all, made another comment. "It's more likely these two will have a kid soon than get married soon." There was some laughter. I didn't say anything. Abigail let out a different kind of laugh, short, almost sarcastic. "I don't think so," she replied. The tone was dry. Her friends looked at her with curiosity, as if expecting her to continue. One of them addressed me directly. "What's wrong, Julio? Or are you sterile or something?" The laughter was widespread. I felt my face get hot, but I tried to stay calm. Before I could say anything, another one added, "I think what's happening is his friend down there doesn't work." The laughter was louder this time. Someone slammed the table laughing. I stood up from the sofa without saying anything. I wasn't angry, I was tired of being the easy target, the one who didn't react, the one who always took it with humor. I walked towards the door with the intention of leaving. No one stopped me immediately. "Hey, calm down," someone said behind me. "It's a joke. Don't be like that. You always take everything so personally," added another voice. Abigail said nothing. That's what bothered me the most. She didn't even look at me. I stood there for a few seconds, taking a deep breath. I really thought about leaving. I thought about taking my things and not coming back that night. But I also thought that if I did, Abigail would say I was overreacting, that I don't know how to socialize, that I ruin the moments. I went back. I returned to my spot as if nothing had happened. Some made comments like, "See, it's no big deal," and continued with their drinks. The atmosphere relaxed again, but something had already broken for me. The topic, far from changing, remained. "Seriously, though," said the same friend as before. "Abby, when are you guys thinking of having kids?" She said it with a curious smile, as if it were a legitimate, mature question. I looked at Abigail. I expected any standard answer. "Oh, we haven't thought about it," a later on, even a "we don't want to." Any of those would have been enough. She didn't hesitate. She turned her head towards me, looked at me directly, and said, "I'd never have kids with you. They'd turn out ugly like you." The sentence fell like a stone in the middle of the room. For a second, there was silence. Then the laughter erupted. Everyone laughed, some louder than others. Some brought their hands to their mouths. Others leaned forward as if they had just heard the best joke of the night. Abigail laughed too. After Abigail said the thing about the kids, and everyone laughed, I wasn't really there anymore. I was sitting, but my head was going at a different pace. I heard the laughter like background noise, as if it were coming from another room. I felt that pressure in my chest that appears when you know something has just broken, but you don't yet know how serious it is. Then one of her friends, the one who always spoke louder than the others, raised his glass, pointed at me with his finger, and said, "Bro, genetics aren't on your side." It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it, confidently, relaxed, like someone making an obvious observation, as if there was no possibility of that being wrong. The laughter returned with more force. It wasn't just Abigail's friends anymore. The men laughed too. Some even leaned forward, resting on their knees, enjoying the moment. I looked around. No one avoided my gaze because no one expected me to react. For them, I was already classified. The one who puts up with it, the one who doesn't make a scene, the one who always swallows the jokes. I looked at Abigail. She was still smiling, not uncomfortably, not forced, smiling for real, as if she thought it was fair, as if deep down she thought the same thing. That's when I spoke. "And you feel you're so pretty?" I asked. There were no screams, no insults, just a direct, clear question. The effect was immediate. Several people stopped laughing. Someone slowly lowered their glass. The music was still playing, but now it seemed too loud. Abigail looked at me as if she couldn't believe I'd had the nerve to say that. She observed me for a few seconds, evaluating me, and then smiled condescendingly. "I don't feel it," she said. "I am." That response was celebrated with murmurs of approval. One of her friends nodded. Another of her friends smiled with satisfaction, as if Abigail had just scored a point. And there, for the first time all night, I felt something like clarity. I had never done what I was about to do. I had never used what I knew about her to hurt her. For years, Abigail had told me about her insecurities like someone confessing something embarrassing. I'd always reassured her. I had always been careful. That night, I decided to stop being careful. "Well," I said, leaning my elbows on my legs, I guess you'd be pretty on another planet because that huge head you have is a bit scary." The silence fell abruptly. It wasn't gradual, it was sharp. Someone let out a nervous laugh and stopped immediately. Another person looked at the floor. Abigail blinked several times, as if she needed to process what she had just heard. I didn't stop. "The truth is, yes," I continued. "Having kids would be a mistake. My nose is a bit big, I don't deny it, but if you add your huge nose to that, the poor kid would look like he has an eagle's beak in the middle of his face." A laugh escaped. It was short, almost involuntary. It came from one of Abigail's friends. She immediately covered her mouth, but it was too late. Abigail turned her head towards her. Incredulous. "What's wrong with you?" she said to me then, her voice breaking. "That's going too far." I saw her eyes fill with tears. I saw her clench her jaw. I saw her try to maintain her composure in front of her friends. And still I didn't stop. "Well," I replied, "if we're talking about going too far, we should talk about how you're gaining too much weight. You keep asking for a bigger size." That's when something exploded. The laughter returned, more disorderly, dirtier. Some people laughed with guilt, others without any shame. A couple tried to hide it, but they didn't succeed. One of Abigail's friends said, shrugging, "Sorry, Abby. We try to hold it in." That was devastating for her. I saw it on her face. She wasn't just being humiliated by me anymore, but also by her own friends. "What's wrong, Abby?" I continued. "Why that face? You look upset?" I thought we were playing. Abigail was red, trembling. Tears were streaming down her face uncontrollably. "You're an idiot," she shouted at me. I looked at her calmly. "So you can humiliate me in front of everyone," I replied. "But if I say something to you, I'm an idiot? I'm sick of you and your little friends." The word "sick" left the room in silence. No one laughed. No one intervened. For the first time all night, everyone seemed uncomfortable. One of the friends stepped forward. The same one who had talked about genetics, he had his fists clenched. "You're a crybaby," he said. "If you don't like the atmosphere, get out. A real man doesn't make these dramas." I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew what I was about to say was cruel. I knew there was no turning back. That guy had lost his friend Pablo 2 months ago. I had gone to the funeral. I had seen him break down. I looked at him intently. A real man. I said, if we're talking about crybabies, you couldn't stop crying for Pablo at his funeral. You cried more than his mother. Or was there something more between you and Pablo, and that's why you miss him so much? The reaction was immediate. Someone said no in a low voice. Another person stood up from the sofa. Abigail stopped crying for a second, completely in shock. The guy didn't answer. He lunged at me. I felt the punch in my face. A sharp impact. The burning was instantaneous. Without thinking, I hit him back. Clumsy, poorly aimed, but direct. They separated us immediately. Only one punch each. After the punch, for a few seconds, no one knew what to do. It wasn't a long or chaotic fight, but it was intense enough to completely break the atmosphere of the gathering. Several voices overlapped at the same time. Someone shouted that it was enough. Another person asked them to calm down. I felt hands on my shoulders, pushing me back, separating me from the guy I had hit. He was also being held back by two friends, but he was trying to break free with his breath ragged and his face red with rage. The pain in my face came later. First, it was a sharp impact, then a hot sensation that spread across my cheekbone. It wasn't bleeding, but it was burning. Still, what weighed most heavily was not the punch, but the uncomfortable silence that had settled in the room. Abigail was standing a few feet away, crying. She wasn't crying in a restrained way, but with messy sobs, breathing heavily, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes were swollen, her lip was trembling. For a moment, I thought someone would go to comfort her. No one did immediately. When she finally spoke, it was shouting. "You're an idiot," she said to me, pointing at me with her finger. "You're a complete idiot. Get out. Get out of here right now." Her broken voice echoed louder than the music, which was still playing as if nothing had happened. It was then that several of her friends reacted, as if that were the signal they had been waiting for. "Yeah, get out, leave now. You're not welcome here. You've already ruined the night. You better leave before this gets worse." The phrases fell one after another without a pause. No one asked what had happened before. No one mentioned what she had said. No one talked about the mockery, the laughter, the comments. Everything had been reduced to a simple scene. I was the problem. I felt a strange mix of tiredness and clarity. I didn't argue. I didn't try to justify myself. I didn't ask for explanations. "Yes," I said, "I'm leaving." Some seemed to relax when they heard that, but I wasn't finished. "But give me the keys to my car." The murmuring returned immediately. Abigail stopped crying for a second and looked at me as if she hadn't understood. "Your car," she replied angrily. "What are you talking about?" "The car I'm driving is mine, idiot." I slowly shook my head. I wasn't angry. I felt empty now. "No," I told her. "The car is mine. It's in my name. I bought it. I gave it to you so you could run your errands, so you wouldn't depend on anyone, so you'd be comfortable. But you don't deserve it." I took another step towards her. "Give me the car keys." I continued, "and the apartment keys. As of today, you don't live there." This time the silence was total. No one moved. No one laughed. No one commented on anything. Several people exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some seemed surprised, others clearly annoyed. Abigail opened her mouth, but didn't speak immediately. Her eyes filled with tears again, faster than before. "You can't do this to me," she said, shaking her head. "You can't. This isn't fair. You and I are supposed to love each other." The phrase floated in the air for a few seconds. It sounded familiar, almost rehearsed, like something you say when there's nothing left to cling to. "Stop the drama," I replied, "and give me the keys." Someone muttered something like, "You're going too far from the back." But no one stepped forward. No one tried to stop me. No one tried to stop her. Abigail stared at me, as if waiting for me to take it back, as if waiting for me to say I was exaggerating, that I was speaking in the heat of the moment. Her hands were trembling. Finally, she reached into her purse. She took out the car keys first. She held them for a few seconds, squeezing them tightly, as if that could change anything. Then she took out the apartment keys. She gathered them all into one bunch. She held them out to me. I took them without saying anything. As I did, I felt a strange weight in my stomach. It wasn't guilt, nor was it relief. It was the certainty that something important had just ended. I turned to leave. As I walked toward the door, I heard footsteps behind me. It was the guy I had hit. He was no longer being held back. His face was tense, his eyes full of hatred. "Go to hell, idiot," he told me. I didn't stop. I didn't look at him directly. I just replied as I kept walking. "Yeah," I said. "Say hi to Pablo for me." I heard a choked cry behind me. Someone said my name. Another voice shouted for me to leave. I opened the door and went out. The cold night air hit my face. My cheekbone ached. My skin was burning. I took a deep breath, as if I needed to check that I was still there. I walked to the car. My car. I opened the door, I sat down, and I closed it. The inside was silent. The keys were still warm from having been in Abigail's hand. I started the car without looking back. During the drive, I didn't play music. I didn't check my phone. I didn't call anyone. The streets were almost empty. The traffic lights seemed to last longer than usual. My hands were trembling slightly on the steering wheel. I wasn't thinking clearly. The scenes repeated over and over in my head. The laughter, the phrase, the looks, the punch, all mixed up. I arrived at the building where we lived. I parked the car in its usual spot. I turned off the engine and sat for a few seconds, staring ahead without moving. Finally, I got out. I climbed the stairs slowly. Each step seemed heavier than the last. I reached the apartment door. I put the key in. I turned it. I opened it. I didn't sleep well that night. It wasn't complete insomnia, but it wasn't rest either. I slept in spurts and woke up with the feeling that something was missing in the apartment. It wasn't exactly silence, because the silence was already there before, even when Abigail lived with me. It was something else, a different kind of absence. 2 days later, Abigail came by for her things. She didn't give advance notice. She just sent me a short message saying she would come in the afternoon. When she arrived, she wasn't alone. She came with a friend. It didn't surprise me. It was consistent with everything else. There was no real greeting, no unnecessary conversation. They entered the apartment and started putting things in bags and boxes. I stayed in the living room, sitting and staring at the floor most of the time. At some point, Abigail turned to me. "You're an idiot," she said, "and not much of a man." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She said it coldly, as if she had rehearsed it before. She expected a reaction, a response, something. I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because there was no point in saying it anymore. The argument, the humiliation, the anger, all of that was already over. At that moment, I just wanted her to leave. She took the last things and left the apartment without saying goodbye. The door closed, and the sound was sharp. Final. It's been 2 weeks since then. She hasn't tried to contact me. She hasn't written. She hasn't called. She hasn't asked for anything, and although it sounds strange, that has made me feel better than I expected. Not immediate relief, not happiness, but a constant feeling of calm. Not having to measure every word, not having to justify silences, not having to put up with jokes disguised as humor. I've thought a lot about what happened, about what I said, about how I reacted. There's a part that does weigh on me. I'm not proud of what I said about Pablo. I know it was low. I know it was cruel. I know it had no real justification beyond the anger of the moment. I didn't say it because I believed it. I said it because I knew it would hurt, and it did. That doesn't make me look good. I know, but I also know I didn't get to that point out of nowhere. No one explodes like that without a prior accumulation. No one crosses so many lines without having felt before that their own were trampled on over and over again. I've reviewed my relationship with Abigail with more honesty now that she's gone, and I realize things I used to normalize. The constant jokes about me in front of others, the comments disguised as jokes, the fact that she never defended me when her friends went too far, the way my boundaries always seemed less important than her comfort. I thought that putting up with it was love, that giving in was being mature, that not making a drama was being a good partner, and little by little I was accepting situations where there was no respect, only habit. What happened that night wasn't an isolated incident. It was just a moment where everything that had accumulated came out all at once, badly and without a filter. I don't justify my words, but I'm not going to pretend I was the only one who crossed a line. Today, 2 weeks later, I feel calmer, not happy, not fulfilled, but more stable. I sleep better. I think more clearly. I don't have that constant knot in my stomach that I used to confuse with love. I learned something that sounds obvious, but is hard to accept when you're in a relationship. If someone doesn't respect you in public, they don't respect you in private. And if you have to endure humiliation to keep the peace, that peace isn't real. I don't know if I'll ever talk to Abigail again. I don't rule it out, nor do I seek it.